welcome back to my read-along of A Tale of Stars and Shadow. Today we're up to chapter 32. Let's get right in. Talyn awoke late in the morning, pleasantly warm and sleepy. After a few moments of dozing, she stretched out languidly, pleased that her knee was only slightly sore. She threw the covers off and loped to the window. Her back and shoulders had stiffened during her sleep and she stretched out, trying to work out the soreness. Then she caught a whiff of herself and grimaced. Her muddy clothes smelled bad. Exploring the room, she found a door leading into a bathing area. It was tiled in pure white, and a small bathtub sat under the window. A fluffy white robe hung on the back of the door. Not wanting to bother the servants to bring hot water for the tub, she stripped off her muddy clothes and washed with the large jug of cold water by the sink. This was the first instance she'd seen of wealth in Dock City. The mayor's home was large, but for guest rooms to have their own individual bathing rooms, that spoke of money. It made her wonder what the source of the mayor's wealth was. He'd seemed a lovely man, but first impressions weren't always correct, and she couldn't help but think of comments Theak and Ty and others had made about how some city officials took bribes from the winged folk. Once done, flesh chilled, she leaned over the bath and poured the remnants of the jug through her hair, rinsing it as best she could. Then, mostly clean, she shrugged on one of the thick white robes and brushed the knots out of her hair, then left it out to dry before venturing out of the room to see if anybody else was up and awake. The floor was silent and empty. She pattered down the hall, the carpet soft on her bare feet. At the top of the stairs, a delicious smell accosted her, wafting up from below. Her stomach rumbled, reminding her that she was starving. She followed the smell to the bottom of the stairs, through a comfortable living area, and into the kitchen. Talyn stood by a cooking fire, deftly scrambling eggs in a pan. Theak was beside him, heating water for tea and monitoring several slices of bread grilling near the eggs. "Morning," Talyn greeted them, taking in the deep breath of the delicious smell. "It's actually almost afternoon," Theak grumbled, but it was good-natured. "We were about to come and wake you for breakfast. It's almost done." "Are there any other supplies around?" Talyn nodded and pointed silently to the larder. She smiled at him and went to investigate. Talyn's reluctance to speak had become a natural part of the wing, something she, and she guessed the others too, found a comfort. It was nice to not always be chattering. Not that she hadn't noticed Talyn spoke more often as time passed, but only when it was just them. He remained mostly mute when they were around others. She raided the larder for a small pile of ingredients, then lugged them back into the kitchen and dumped them next to the cook fire beside Talyn's. The kitchen was so big she had plenty of room to work, throwing together her ingredients and stirring thoroughly. "Where did you learn to cook?" she asked as they worked. Theak gave her a sour look. "I'm making toast, Captain." A trill of laughter inside her head. "I don't remember a time you made toast without burning it to a crisp." "Yes, all right," she said good-naturedly. "Even so, I've been told I'm incapable of successfully toasting bread. My mother taught me to cook." As always, Talyn was a little taken aback by the cultured smoothness of the big man's voice, and in this case even more surprised. She hadn't expected him to answer. She and Theak carefully remained silent and casual as he continued. "I had 3 sisters and 4 brothers, and Mama was a slave too, so she had to try and make the food rations she received enough for all of us until we were old enough to start working too. Then we could earn our own rations." Talyn kept turning the eggs. Eggs were her favourite. Mine too. Talyn thought she might snap the handle off her pan, the fury that swept through her was so powerful. Yet anger wasn't going to help Talyn. From Theak's suddenly stiffened shoulders, she suspected he was feeling the same way. She cleared her throat. "Did your mother make them with oil or butter?" "I always preferred oil." A little smile flickered over the big man's face. "Me too, Captain, but she loved butter." "Butter is so much better," Sari roused. "Shush you." A moment of comfortable silence fell, but then the telltale rustle of feathers sounded at the doorway. "Pancakes!" Tierslyn's voice rang out a moment later, gleeful with delight. She glanced at him. Had she finally found a food that both winged folk and humans ate? "Would you mind flipping these while I make more mixture so there's enough for everyone?" He came to stand beside her, flicking wet hair out of his eyes. She glared at him when she was showered with water droplets, but he only grinned back at her and began to rather clumsily flip the pancakes. She swallowed a smile. It was unlikely Tierslyn had ever had to cook in his life. Corin and Zamrel appeared soon after. They took in the scene in the kitchen and went to investigate the larder for themselves. When they reappeared with their own supplies, Talyn looked at his eggs and sighed thoughtfully. They were cooked, so he shoveled them into a tray and kept them warm over the embers of his fire. Then he went back into the larder to get more eggs. None of them made snarky or otherwise negative comments about the well-stocked nature of the mare's larder, though she kept anticipating Zamril or Theak to come out with something at any second. So they liked the mare despite his wealth. Interesting. A half-turn later, they all sat down to a meal of Halun's eggs, some with butter, some with oil, Theak's toast and tea, Talyn's pancakes, Corin's cold ham cuts, and Zamril's fried mushrooms and tomatoes. The wolves ate, chatted and laughed, all picking on each other's food, especially Theak's overly sweet tea. Halun consumed about 3 times more than the rest of them, then sat back in his chair with a satisfied sigh. For her part, Talyn sat mostly silent amongst it all, muscles aching pleasantly with weariness, food warm in her belly, and for a moment not weighed down with grief. Eventually, Theak pushed away his empty plate with a regretful sigh. We should get going if we're going to fit our afternoon training in. We've already missed the morning session. I want to make sure we get that Sabai sideways shuffle perfected before the game. Right, Corin nodded, picking up his own plate and Halun's and heading to the sink. Chairs creaked as Tierslin and Halun rose to help him clear up. The game is the day after tomorrow. Talyn eyed them suspiciously. Where was this sudden enthusiasm for training coming from? No training today. We need to rest after last night, or we'll never make it through a game. Theak cleared his throat. Mayor Doran sent a message while you were sleeping. He says he and his wife will be busy at town hall until late, so we're welcome to rest here for the afternoon. All gazes swung to Talyn. She certainly didn't feel up to the war walk yet, and was happy to accomplish that after some more rest. Then it's sorted. We'll rest this afternoon and head back up this evening. She was delighted to find a library in the house and spent the early part of the afternoon curled up in the living room reading. Outside, the sky was a cloudless blue, as if the heavy rain clouds of the day and night before had never been. The humidity had returned with a vengeance, too. Just a preview of what's to come, Theak said when she expressed surprise. Although the amount of rain we got yesterday and last night will be spread out over a week or more once the monsoon season arrives properly. One of the mayor's servants had washed all their clothes, and after hanging out in the hot and humid morning sun, they were already dry. Andros Tyre stopped by mid-afternoon to let them know that the floods were quickly receding now the rain had stopped, and the rest of the city patrol had been released from the citadel. Not that many of mine are pleased about being told to help mop and sweep at the clean-up. Lucky Captain Finnis is home with the gout once again and left me in charge, he said cheerfully. Speaking of which, I'd best get back to the market quarter and make sure they're not slacking off. Has Captain Dolgen sent his men to help too? Theak asked. The dock quarter was probably the worst hit outside the port quarter. Ty shook his head. Some of his off-duty men are helping out, but that's all. He's a good lad, Theak said as they watched Ty leave from the front porch. Talyn flashed him a smile before going back inside. I'm not surprised. It was you who trained him. Halun joined her in the lounge, nose deep in a book entitled Farming in Arid Conditions. Theak, Corin and Zamril sat a little further away, playing what sounded like a complicated and contentious game of cards. She had no idea what Tierslin was doing. Later in the afternoon, she decided to go out for some fresh air. She took her cleaned and dried clothes upstairs to change, before making her way to the back door, which led out to a beautiful garden. High brick walls enclosed the space, she assumed to keep intruders out. She strolled through the garden slowly, letting the warm air and scent of flowers clear her mind, and turned her thoughts to the Alea game. Considering the superior strength, speed, and mobility of the winged folk, Talyn's strategy centered on stamina and agility. If the wolves could outrun and outlast the winged folk, and if they could use Callanan fighting Sabai to match some of their opponent's natural grace and magical ability, they might have a chance of putting up a good fight. And if she played, well, the Shadowhawk had been right. She suspected there were few falcons that could take her on in single combat and come out the winner. But she was still in two minds about how much she should involve herself, having taken both Theak and the Shadowhawk's warnings to heart. A rustling caught her attention, drawing her out of her musings. She looked up, catching a flash of movement high on the wall through the trees. Before her mind could put together what was happening, the twanging of a bow cut the thick air. Her breath lodged in her throat, muscles turning rigid with panic, and then something slammed into her shoulder. She stumbled backwards, swearing aloud as hot flame flared down her right side. Panic warred with the need to respond inside her. It scrambled her thoughts as she glanced frantically around, trying to work out where the attack was coming from. A figure disappeared over the wall, human, face covered by a black mask and form hidden by a dark cloak. She staggered, faint with shock and sudden pain. What? An arrow protruded from her right shoulder. Bright red blood, her blood, was already flowing through the hole in her shirt. The sight of it, of blood seeping and a fletched arrow embedded in flesh, brought memory crushing mercilessly down around her. Sari, lying prone on the rocky ground, arms askew and face turned to the side, The odd cloudiness in her brown eyes, already telling Talyn what had happened even before she could scream, could run, unheeding of the danger, across the clearing to slide to her knees beside her partner. 2 arrows slamming into the ground at her feet before the other Callanan with them could rush in to take out the archer. Fumbling, crying, unable to breathe, desperately checking for a pulse, but the arrow had gone through Sari's heart and she'd been dead in that instant. No time for a final goodbye, no time for anything. Just gone. She'd been alive, laughing, fighting with as much exuberance as Talyn, and then she was gone. No. A scream lodged in her throat, panicked, aching gasp replacing it. Talyn sank to her knees, the fingers of her uninjured arm clutching at the grass, seeking a way to hold on, to keep a grip, to stop herself drowning in the grief of that day. The pain was insistent, but it barely registered. In her mind, she was back in that warm summer's afternoon, trying to understand that the fact that her partner, her best friend, the most important person in her world, was gone. They had tried dragging Talyn away to a more secure location, but she wouldn't leave. 2 Callanan had to carry them both. She'd barely noticed. Chest heaving with broken sobs, tears streamed down her face. She swayed on her knees, fell forward to the ground, gasping for air, fingers curling uselessly in the grass. Pain stabbed bright and hot through her. From where she'd fallen, she could see the hazy outline of the back of the house through tears and shock. Zamril was coming out the back door, a questioning look on his face as if he were looking for her. His eyes widened in horror as he caught sight of her. What happened? She could only close her eyes, bite her lip against the agonizing pain in her shoulder and the even more agonizing grief of memory. Her vision blurred, blood loss making her dizzy. Talyn! Zamril shouted the healer's name at the top of his lungs, running to Talyn's side. What can I do? He looked helplessly at the bud pulling on the ground under her shoulder. A wave of dizziness passed over her, and she shook her head. She heard him distantly as he swore repeatedly under his breath. Talyn! He screamed again. Everyone inside had heard his first panic shout, and all 4 wolves appeared as he yelled a second time. They ran through the back door and slid to a halt at the sight of Talyn bleeding on the grass. Shit! Thiak was the first to recover from stunned shock, reacting as quickly as she should have when she'd first heard the intruder. He grabbed Talyn's arm and dragged him over to her. Talyn snapped out of his shock at Thiak's rough touch, dropping to his knees and focusing his brown eyes on her shoulder, one hand hovering just above it. Will she be all right? Corin asked in a shaky voice. He and Halun crouched nearby, wearing identical panicked expressions. Talyn's vision worsened, their voices turning distant. She's going into shock, Talyn's voice sounded faintly. Is that bad? Zamril demanded. I need to stop the bleeding, Talyn said quickly. Then we'll worry about the arrow. Halun, I need her inside and on a flat surface. A moment later, Talyn was gently turned, then lifted off the ground. So softly it was like she weighed nothing to the big man. Even that small movement sent agony spearing through her, and she cried out. Corin, Zamril, go and heat some water and get me clean towels and a sharp knife, Talyn snapped, in control now. I'll go after the bastard, Thiak growled low in his throat. Captain, did you see where he went? Thiak's words dimly penetrated her fog, but not strongly enough for her to properly process them or understand. Something inside her fought for clarity, knew she shouldn't be numb like this, but it failed. Halun carried her to the long table by the fireplace in the lounge area. He laid her down and tenderly tucked her hair behind her ears, his eyes and touch communicating his worry for her in a way that words never could. While Corin and Zamril gathered what Talyn needed, the winged man worked on stopping the blood flow. His hands moved over her shoulder at a frantic pace. Corin and Zamril re-entered the room with loud steps and panicked questions. Should we go and fetch a healer? Corin asked worriedly, hovering over Talyn. I can go, Zamril volunteered immediately. The only person better than myself to work on Talyn is another of the winged healers. I know of none who will come here to treat a human, Talyn said tersely. The Falcon could make one of them come, Zamril argued. There's no time. This wound needs treating now, Talyn snapped, but then his confidence seemed to fade. I don't know. The wound in her magic is worse somehow. I don't know if I can... His face swam above her, pale despite his brown skin, and something about the worry and panic on his beautiful winged folk features reached her. She fought for the strength to reach out to him. Talyn. Yes, Captain? He bent closer to hear her. Trust you. He huffed a hopeless breath, but when she wouldn't release his gaze, he gave a nod and straightened. Zamril, I'm it. I can take care of this. Are you with me? We both are. There was no hesitation in Zamril's voice as he looked at Corin, then nodded at Talyn. Good. The bleeding has stopped for the moment. I'm going to cut the arrow out and stitch the wound. I'll also need to investigate whether any ligaments have been damaged. He gave them a look. The bleeding will increase the moment I start cutting. One of you needs to keep pressure on the wound site to slow it down. That's going to hurt, Talyn protested in a whisper. Here, I found this in the cupboard. Samaral held up a bottle of spirits. He poured a cup and gave it to Talyn. She gulped it down, trying not to choke, and the fiery liquid warmed her insides. I can staunch the blood flow, just tell me what to do. Have you cleaned the knife? Tearslin looked at Corrin. Corrin nodded. It's my sharpest. I rubbed it in alcohol. You won't even feel it, Captain. You know how sharp my knives are. Talyn silently blessed the young wolf. The sharper the knife, the easier it would cut, the less it would hurt. I'm going to need to hold her down. Halun, Samaral, stand right there, please, and use that towel to staunch the bleeding. It's going to hurt, but you'll need to apply pressure as hard as you can. Tearslin's brisk confidence was calming everyone down. Talyn's eyes drifted closed. She was in good hands. Corrin, raid the cupboards for any sort of healing herbs or medicine. See if one of the servants knows where they're kept. Also, I'll need strong twine and needle to stitch this up once I'm done. Halun leaned forward and gripped her forearms firmly, giving no leeway for Talyn to move. When the knife cut into her skin, she roared in pain. Halun didn't let up, and Tearslin kept going, working quickly and efficiently to cut the arrow out. Samaral pressed the towel hard into the areas Tearslin wasn't working, and she wasn't sure which hurt more. Talyn cursed him endlessly as agony tore through her. It was unbearable, and just when she thought she couldn't take any more, Tearslin lifted the knife and pulled it gently on the arrow. There was a chilling sucking sound, and then it was out. She sagged into the table, covered in sweat and exhausted. The memories continued to swirl around her, the scent of sweat and blood and fear drawing them like a lure. Did you get what I asked? Tearslin asked Corrin. I got the twine and needle, and I found some herbal paste in the larder. It was prepared by your healers. The name Greencrest is on the jar. Is that okay? Perfect. She's one of my teachers, and she specializes in healing herbs. Tearslin smeared plenty of the sweet-smelling paste into the open wound, then set about stitching it up. The entire process hurt like blazes. Talyn lay there gritting her teeth and gripping Halun's hand for support. Eventually it was over, and the agony slowly faded to a dull throb in her shoulder. Tearslin directed the others to clean up the mess, then began using his magic on her shoulder. His face was a mask of concentration as his hands worked above the newly stitched wound. Gradually the pain eased, and Talyn's rigid muscles slowly relaxed. When Tearslin stopped, he was pale and exhausted, bracing himself on his arms as he leaned over her, sweat sleeked and breathing hard. Part of her realized what he'd just done for her, what he'd given, and she swallowed, managing a whispered, "Thank you." "You're welcome," he smiled. "Now rest. You'll be fine, I promise." "My arm? You'll regain full mobility, but only if you keep it immobilized while it heals," he frowned. "You won't be able to play in 2 days." The front door slammed open and Theak stomped in. He looked livid, directing a fierce glare at Tearslin. "Is the captain okay?" Tearslin straightened to look at him. "I think so, yes." "Did you find who did this?" Samaral demanded. "No. I followed witness sightings across the town and back and ended up nowhere," he said angrily. "Damn it!" "That's all right," Halun said calmly. "You can't do more than your best." "Did you find any trace of the attacker at all?" Tearslin asked. Theak explained his search in more detail, while Tearslin wrapped Talyn's arm and shoulder in bandages, and then fashioned a sling to keep it still. After that, Halun carried her over to the couch, and Corrin disappeared into the kitchen. He came back with a mug of steaming tea. "Drink this, it should help with the pain," he smiled shyly. "It's what my father always used to make for me when I hurt myself." Talyn drank slowly, her head drooping back against the cushion. She felt terrible. The flashbacks left her emotionally wrung out, while Tearslin's work left her physically exhausted and in lingering pain. The conversation raged around her as the wolves sat in chairs surrounding the couch. One witness said they saw a man running from the back wall wearing a mask like the Shadowhawk was wearing last night, Theak said. Samaral snorted. "That's right. He saves her, and a lot of other people, then comes to try and kill her today. I don't think so. It's more likely one of Prince Azralan's falcons. They don't want the captain in the game tomorrow because she could outplay any of them. Notice it's only a disabling wound, not aimed to kill?" She stirred, dizziness making her thoughts foggy. Samaral had already guessed how much of a difference she might make. It was hard to find the motivation to follow that thought, and she didn't try. "We don't know that for certain. Whoever it was might be a bad shot, an inch down and they'd have hit her heart," Tearslin said. "It's not the Shadowhawk," Corrin said, certainty filling his voice. "The arrow shot wasn't his. There's no lightning mark on it." A brief silence fell. She shivered, trying to hide her hissing breath. Again she saw the flash of Sari lying there, arrow through her heart, as if she were right back there in that clearing. A tear slid down her cheek, and she had to close her eyes for a moment. Either they didn't notice, or they pretended not to. After a moment, Halun kept talking. "I'll put the word around on the docks." There was an edge of menace to the big man's soft voice she hadn't heard before. "If anyone knows anything, I'll get it out of them." "What about the game?" Corrin said. "Clearly she won't be able to play." We'll play, Theax said. We've got enough players. I think we should call the game off, Talyn said weakly. Without me, all 5 of you will have to play the full game. You're exhausted after last night. I appreciate your sudden willingness to play, but I don't want any of you to get hurt. You trained us better than that, Captain, and you know it. We'll play, Corran said. It's not brave unless you're scared, and you do it anyway, Zamrel said determinedly. Right? She bit her lip, fighting back more tears, and then the exhaustion and pain won, sucking her down into deep blackness. And that brings us to the end of chapter 32. I hope you enjoyed that one. It's a little bit of a tense, emotional, but also lovely chapter, I think. Now's the point to jump out if you'd like to avoid any spoilers in my author commentary. So if you are leaving us here, I really look forward to seeing you again for the next chapter. But otherwise, let's step into the other room and let's have a little chat about this chapter. Oh, that chapter was a little bit of a roller coaster, wasn't it? I'd like to start with by saying that breakfast scene, though, made me really hungry. And now I'd really like to go off and eat some eggs and fried mushrooms and some of Theax's toast. But yeah, what a lovely little kind of scene. I think the night of the floods before, the way that they all came together, the bond was really kind of locked into place. There's something that Talyn had been building with them since her first arrival, but it took the night of the floods to really bring all those threads together and then click into place as the wolves as they now are and will be for the remainder of this series. But then we have this scene in the morning after all of that where there's just that quiet intimacy that they have now that wasn't there before, and it's helpful for Talyn, it's helpful for them, and it just gives them that moment of quiet, I guess, in the eye of the storm, between the events of what happened last night and then what's coming next, because obviously the LA game is coming up, and as we all know, that has consequences that kind of breaks the wolves apart for a little while, particularly in terms of Tislin being taken away from them. So they have this moment together now, which I thought was really important, but also really showcased the quiet intimacy, like I said, that they now have following that clicking into place of the wolf bonds the night before. Then we have, obviously, the scene in the garden where Talyn is attacked and shot with an arrow. And for the first time, we actually learn the circumstances under which Sari died. They were on a Calendar mission in the middle of a battle, and a stray arrow caught Sari in the heart. And Talyn didn't have an opportunity to say goodbye, to say anything. Sari died instantly. And the mirror of that circumstance happening to her brings all those memories and that trauma flashing back. And Talyn is struck as much by that trauma as she is by the physical arrow embedded in her shoulder. The rest of the scene, she's pretty much out of it between the pain and the grief and the memories and the trauma. But peripherally, we get to see all the wolves once again really banding together to help her. They're clearly panicked and worried and love her. Like it's not stated specifically, but obvious from how they all respond here, and the way they put their faith in Tislin to help her when he essentially is still a training healer mage amongst the wing folk. They put their faith in him to help her, and he does. He just needs that little bit of encouragement from her, and it's a really beautiful scene. As much pain and suffering as Talyn is going through as you're reading and even writing that was from a writing perspective. When you're plumbing the depths of a grief like that and pain and trauma like that, it's not easy to do, and you kind of have to, I do anyway, have to force myself to kind of dig to bring those memories out, because when I'm writing, I'm feeling what the character is feeling, which in 99% of the time is a lot of fun and why I love writing so much. But those really deep traumatic things are actually quite hard to do, and I really have to force myself to dig in and make sure that's realistic and that the character's really feeling it. But beyond that, on the periphery of that is the love that the wolves show her, and the love and care with which they treat her, which kind of makes me choke up a little bit every time I read that scene. And when I was writing that scene too, it's just really lovely. So yeah, quite a roller coaster scene, a lot of emotions up and down, but I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're loving how the wolves are coming together. If you have any questions on this one or comments, please drop them below in the comments. I'd love to answer. But otherwise, we're coming up on chapter 33 soon. We're building up to the LA game. That's going to be the high point of this book, or maybe the second high point of this book. And I can't wait to get to it. So I'll see you soon and have a great day.